Before we get into the video, please, it'll help the channel and help us be able to continue to do these podcasts if you hit the subscribe little bell so that when I do these each week, you're notified of when we post this. We don't get paid for subscriptions or anything, but it does help generate more interest in what we're doing and get more. The more subscribers we get, the better. So, and also any comments that you care to make about the topics we speak about, please do so. Thank you very much. Hi, folks. This is Twitch, your host for Alert and Alive, for another podcast on preparedness. As you know from my first podcast, I served in the United States Army as a military police officer for 30 years and retired as a full colonel. Today I want to talk a little bit about the importance of bug-out bags, or go bags as people call them, and why in an emergency situation these little bags with a few essential items that we may need to help us survive and get through a rough time can be so important. We're not going to show you the actual contents of a bag this episode. What I plan to do is relate a few experiences from my own life to illustrate the importance of these. But next week, I'll have a good friend that I know come and help show all of you what these bags can be composed of, just to give you some ideas. They don't have to be extravagant, exorbitant purchases that eat a lot of your time and expense, but they must have some essential things in order for us to survive any emergency given situation. In the previous podcast, I spoke with you about my assignment at the Pentagon during 9/11, the infamous terrorist attack on the building, on our nation. And I want to go into a little more detail on that today and what I was doing when all of that happened. I was assigned to work in the Pentagon as a military police organization integrator, the guy that was responsible for developing the MP force structure for the Army, which is simply the composition of our units and the types of personnel and equipment that would man them for our war and peacetime missions. Very important job. At the time that I was assigned to the Pentagon, our family lived in Stafford, Virginia, which is about 40 miles south. And because of the heavy traffic each day along the I-95 corridor, the trip would go much faster if you could get into the HOV lanes. And to get into the HOV lanes there, you have to have at least 3 people to ride along. And so it was my habit to go over to a local McDonald's in Stafford each morning at 5:30 and there get in a line with other people and wait for drivers to come up to the line with a little sign in the windshield stating where in the Washington, D.C. area that you were going to. Then you would jump in the vehicle with that person along with another person, so there were 3 in the car, and you could take the HOV lane in, which saved a lot of time in early morning traffic into DC. So I would get there around 6:30 in the morning, then I would go down to the Pentagon gym, work out for an hour or so, and then go into the building to do my duties. It just so happened that on the day of the 9/11 attacks, when I got to the gym and opened up my bag to work out, I had forgotten my gym shoes. And I remember being so frustrated that I couldn't do my workout because I didn't have a pair of gym shoes for running and being in the gym. So I closed up my bag, I went up to the building where my office was and started work on emails and doing early morning kind of activities. And it turns out that during this particular time of my assignment, I was also working on a Department of the Army task force, which took us out of the Pentagon and into Crystal City into a high-rise office area where we could oversee the Pentagon, but get us out away from influences and other kinds of things that would affect our work on this task force. So I did my early coordination in the building earlier than what I usually do and went over to my office in Crystal City. When the terrorists struck the Twin Towers in New York, I called my wife at home, told her to turn on the news, that our nation was under attack. And she asked me at the time, she said, well, do you think the Pentagon will get hit? And I said, no. I said, the Pentagon is one of the safest places in the world. Don't worry about me. Everything's going to be fine. And then about 20 minutes after I told her that, the Pentagon got hit with a terrorist plane. Fortunately for me, I was in the high-rise building in Crystal City where I had been working with this other task force. But had I been in the Pentagon itself when that plane flew into the building, it hit or struck the general area where I had been working in my other office. I really don't know what would have happened had I remained in the building. I would tell you that once that attack took place, the entire city shut down. Okay, the subways didn't move. Nobody could drive their private vehicles in and out of that area because it was closed off for emergency responders, the police, the fire trucks, the ambulances to respond to what had happened. You could sense a feeling of panic in the building, in the entire city. Nobody really knew what was happening or if this was the first of more attacks to follow. Those individuals who are not directly involved with saving lives or putting out the fires or responding were asked to evacuate the building immediately. And I was one of those individuals. So with the highest level of force protection condition that there is, force protection condition Delta, which means all the bases locked down and nobody moves without, if you're a vehicle trying to get into Fort Myer, then you're going to be in a long line waiting because the military and police at the gates are going through every vehicle, searching every vehicle, and with bomb dogs to sniff things out to ensure that nothing else can get through and hurt or cause damage if that would have been the plan of terrorists. I ended up not having any communications on my cell phone with my family. My wife really didn't know where I was or what my whereabouts was, and it took me till about 8 o'clock that night to get back home to Stafford, Virginia, where I had to literally do some hitchhiking, unfortunately, and a lot of walking, and people were gracious enough to pick me up and take me home that were further out away from the city in the attacks. So it was a terrible day. Later, after I'd returned to work and things had settled down some weeks later, I took a couple of my sons to the sites of the Twin Towers in New York City. And I wanted them to see and understand what a horrific attack this was against our country, where more Americans died that day than when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th that started our involvement in World War II. And I told them, if your father is asked to deploy to a foreign land, this is why. Sure enough, in 04 and 05, as I said in my first video, I was asked to deploy my battalion as a battalion commander in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. But the point I want to make to you about 9/11 was I had wished so badly that I had some extra water, maybe a few snacks, and of course my gym shoes and my gym bag for walking the many miles that I had to walk that day to get back home. So that was a lesson learned from me. The second experience that I had was when I was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I was serving in a leadership position there as a brigade commander when we had a horrific ice storm that shut the installation down. As the key leader, I stayed on the post because I had a responsibility for the soldiers in my command. Most of the other senior officers that lived near me had evacuated and gone up to St. Louis to rent rooms in different lodging facilities so that they wouldn't have to, not have any power, no running water, and extremely cold temperatures. But as I was required to stay and my wife and children wanted to stay with me, we dipped into our emergency preparedness, call it our emergency kit, go bag, if you will, and we survived the 3-4 days there at Fort Leonard Wood without any power, any running water. It was cold, it was uncomfortable, but because we had prepared and had a preparedness kit, we got through it. We got through it okay. And so, lesson learned from the Pentagon experience. Fast forward another 6-7 years, we were more prepared for the next thing to hit our family when I was at Fort Leonard Wood. My final illustration comes from a family I know that left their home to go shopping. And to get to the mall they wanted to go to, it was about 40 miles from where they lived. And as they were driving on this hot summer day to the mall, they had a vehicle breakdown. Their vehicle broke down. It required getting off the road and being out in this terrible heat with a couple of small children for a period of time before the tow truck arrived, was able to remove their vehicle and then get to a cooler place until they could arrange to get transportation home. This family had no go bag. They didn't have anything in the car during a very, very hot July day. No water, no snacks. Thankfully, their cell phones worked, and thankfully they were able to get someone to come and tow the car. But they told me they had wished they would have had something in the car, a small bag, especially with some water or drinks or other things in it, for the children. A bug-out bag, a go bag are very, very important and can play a huge role in our lives. And next week during the episode, we're going to lay several of these bags out just to give you some ideas of some things that you can put into it that will hopefully be helpful to all of you. I have kind of a motto I learned over my time in the military, and it kind of goes like this. And I'm going to end each podcast with this motto, and that is proper prior planning prevents pathetic poor performance. You guys all have a great week, and really looking forward to laying out these bags for you next week. Thank you.